Everybody, welcome to Season 2 of Layers, the interview program by Layered Reality Productions, in which I, Tom de Wit, will be talking to artists about albums that they made, what the songs on those albums are about, what the thought behind those albums is, and everything in between. Basically just a chill chat with me, hanging out with musicians I like, talking about records that they are very proud of. And we're happy to say that this second season is going to be featuring many more bands. We started the first season with 3 bands. We did Romain Jenx, ILO, and Chaos. And the second season is starting off with Omnerod, the Amensal Rise. Let's go! Romain, nice to have you here, my friend.
Nice to be here, buddy. Nice to see you.
We saw each other in IRL at Prog Power last year, which is almost a year ago from the day we're recording this now. Prog Power is in what, 2 weeks?
That's true, yeah.
You guys came up on stage and I was not prepared. I was horrendously unprepared for what you guys were going to do.
So were we, to be honest.
And I was just like, what? I don't know what's going on. The band. That's basically what it felt like when you guys started playing.
That's a good thing, I guess.
In my opinion, that is one of the greatest compliments. There's a lot of bands, a lot of music that I really, really like, but I can kind of predict how the song is gonna go, if you know what I mean.
Well, that's very nice to hear.
And with you guys, it was like I was continuously not aware of what was happening. For those of you watching Layers for the first time, this is normally not a sucking fest, and I'm not intending on making it one. But I did want to start with this to give you guys a bit of context. Romain and we talked. I basically signed the band almost on the spot. I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. I want this with Layered Reality. I believe the Prog Power set, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that was most of the Amensal Rise, the album that we're talking about now, right?
Roughly half of it, I would say.
Okay.
Which is already a pretty good chunk. And our set is long enough for us to dive deep into several releases, which is good.
For every band, that is good. Let's face it. Yeah. It's like you always want you also want to give some love to the older tracks and everything.
Absolutely.
Before we dive into the album itself, like some people might have never heard of Omnerod or you or whatever. So maybe you could do like a little introduction, like. Who are you, and what is your part in the band, and how instrumental were you in the forming of it? Just give us like a little overview.
My name is Romain Jenx. I'm French and I live in Belgium. And I joined Omnerod, who was a teenager passion project of nerds that love prog metal. That was formed in like 2009, I guess. Okay. And I joined the guys in 2011. Because they needed a guitar player at the time. We had a very good singer back then. And then the band evolved, went through several lineup changes, and eventually we were in need of a new singer. We met a few people. It happens for, I think, many singers in the scene. I went like, might as well fuck it up myself instead of having someone else fuck it up. That's how it evolved, and at this time, I think it was right before Arteries, which was 2019, our second album. It was basically Pablo and myself, the two of us. Pablo, who's playing drums in the band.
So what has that been like that forever? Like, what was the whole band you two, or was there different lineups before that?
When I joined, it was Pablo, myself, and Daniel, who was the guitar player and singer at the time, who left the band right after we released Ivory Dune in 2014, which was our first album. He mixed it, mostly wrote it, and recorded a lot of it himself. So it was very difficult for him. It was a very difficult, very big challenge, and so he decided to leave the band after the album. And so after this, it was the two of us with Pablo, and we met a lot of people for both bass duties, guitar duties, vocal duties. Many great people, many great musicians, but eventually it didn't work out the way we wanted it to work out. We stayed like the two of us for, I would say, 5 years, rehearsing the same tracks over and over, getting bored in rehearsal space, getting discouraged. And then when we recorded the second album, we met André, who mixed the album, and Anthony, who was a session musician on the album for growling vocals, and they eventually joined us, and that was the first time, I think, in Omnerod history where the lineup was complete. So even though the band was formed in 2009 by like 13-year-old nerds, the first show was in 2019, I guess.
Yeah, but to be fair, sometimes things just go the way they go, and it needs time, you know. So
Sure, it was very organic in this way.
There's something to be said for that. Like, every band has a different kind of trajectory. So, you know, whatever brings you to the point where you are now? Because the Amensal Rise is your, and you got to correct me on this if I'm wrong, but that's your third record, I believe, right?
Right, correct.
Yeah. Rise, and that's what we're talking about in this bunch of episodes. Depending on how long this interview is going to be, it's either going to be 2 or 3. You viewers at home, you'll be able to judge on that. Mm-hmm. And I figure we should just dive into the record head first. So here we go. We're going to go into the first track. We're gonna head into the first song. First song is called Sunday Heat. When I read that title, I was like, it sounds a lot nicer than the song actually. You know, in terms, I was like, this is gonna be a nice summery happy. It was not a summery happy song. Yeah, it really wasn't.
No.
Tell me about it.
A good way to start this would be to say that the album revolves around musical concepts, which is that it keeps speeding up in terms of tempo. The tempo is ever increasing from track 1 to 7, and during the tracks themselves, there's no slowing down, and it's either small increments or sudden bursts and increases of tempo. So obviously the first track is destined to be very slow and doomy, and the last track to be more hectic and more intense. So this was a very good framework for me for the entire album, because I feel like limitations and boundaries are a good vector for creativity in many ways. When you have those restrictions, when you set yourself those boundaries, then you kind of know where you're heading in a way, which might seem weird, but I think every musician who has ever tried this might relate to that.
I would say that you need limits to be limitless.
That's a very accurate way to describe it. The amount of limit you can set yourselves is endless, so you have also endless possibilities. Every
time I talk to people who play jazz, it's like, you know, you got to study all the damn chords so you can break them. You know, it's a bit like that, really.
Absolutely. You have to know what you're getting out of. And Sunday Heat was the first track on the album, and obviously was meant to be very slow, very doomy, and to start in an almost noisy post-metal way. Like bands, I was very influenced by bands like Swans or Godspeed You Black Emperor.
I definitely, like, you're saying Swans, and I gotta admit, I've been, like, the 2 bands I've been listening to this year, little side tangent, but I kind of dove into Cardiacs and Swans. Those have been my 2 bands in the last year. So when you're saying Swans, I'm like, oh yeah, of course, that completely checks out. Like almost like that no wave kind of pummeling to it in a way.
Absolutely, you know, there's a thing to be said about what I would feel, what I think is like abstract music. There's not a real like rhythm, melody, tempo you can rely upon when you're listening to it, and I really love this vibe. I didn't want it to be a vibe throughout the entire album, but it was a good way for us to start it.
For one song, definitely. There's obviously artists that do that forever, and for me it's also like, I love it, but I'm also happy that it picks up at a certain point.
Dynamics, man. Yeah. So that to me dynamics is paramount when creating music. I like to listen to music that is not dynamic, but when I make music myself, it's my main tool, I would say.
But it's also a mindset thing. It's like I can really appreciate lo-fi hip-hop if I'm in the right mindset, and I can also appreciate this kind of stuff. It's like whatever your mood is, really.
Absolutely. There's a mood for everything. Especially for, I think, the Amensal Rise. We wanted it to feel, because it's very intense throughout, we didn't want it to be like pummeling all the way through, restless and kind of hard to listen to, especially since it's pretty long. So we wanted it to feel dynamic with like, in any way we could, really. Like the tempo changes, acoustic breaks, melodies.
Well, that was one of the reasons why I liked it so much, because it's like, there's a lot of bands that could, you know, legit make a lot of noise, but are not able to go into a good acoustic passage 2 seconds later. You know, like that's an art that not everyone can do that.
And it's also, I think, really hard to not make it sound gimmicky.
Exactly.
Which I'm not sure we still are able to do. I still feel when I'm listening to some parts of the Amensal Rise, I feels a bit like Igor-like or Opeth-like, because they did it so well. You can't help but like think like it's been done so well in the past.
Yeah, but then again, I mean, let's face it, people say the Beatles is the biggest band on the planet, and the moment they asked them what their influences were, they were like, they were ripping off the 40s, you know? So it's like, in that regard, we all take inspiration, let's face it.
That's true. That's also a good segue for Sunday Heat and the rest of the album, is that I was always very honest with myself regarding those inspirations. And sometimes I have an inspiration in mind right before I start writing a song. Like, okay, I want this to be in the vein of X band or X artist, and oftentimes it's a kind of a blend of a mix of different bands and artists, so it doesn't feel that
obvious,
that clear, that obvious eventually. But for me, it's very clear from the get-go. And for Sunday Heat, main influence, as I said, was Swans, but also Yob.
I also definitely heard some Neurosis in there, you know, like that.
Oh yeah,
that pushing wall of guitar, like almost pushing you to the limit of feeling like this is uncomfortable to listen to, but just before that point, you know, like that's really what it felt like.
That's spot on, man. That there's Neurosis and also a bit of Cult of Luna were very big inspirations for us, especially for this song. And as a matter of fact, there's this kind of weird scream in the middle of the song, which keeps on going.
Yeah.
And we couldn't figure it out in the studio how to make that work. And what the reference I had in mind, which I kept playing to the other guys, was the long scream "Into the Wind" by Neurosis.
That one pierces bone marrow, man. That is ridiculous.
This is ridiculous.
Yeah, it is.
And it kind of feels suspended in time, you know? You never know when it's gonna drop, when it's gonna end, where it's gonna go. I love it.
And it just keeps going. It's like, Actually, I was just mentioning Cardiacs. It just reminds me of the end of Dirty Boy by Cardiacs, which is like this 3-minute long note that just keeps going. Like everyone's like, Jesus Christ, take a breath! You know, that kind of situation. It's freaking ridiculous. So I get the musical concept is pretty clear, and we'll touch upon that with every song, obviously. Mm-hmm. Is there, because I wasn't entirely sure, because you kept certain things abstract on purpose, I take it. Is there like a deeper thought behind the entire album, or is it more like every song has its own meaning? I don't know how far you can elaborate on that without breaking the immersion, obviously.
So it's definitely a concept album, and there's a common thread in between the songs. And actually it's rather than one common thread, it's 3 common threads. I was in a very specific moment of my life when I wrote the album, going through a lot of changes, a lot of mental struggles in many ways, and so there were 3 main themes that were very important to me, very personal to me when I wrote the album, and I wanted the album to follow those 3 themes with a similar dynamic. So all those 3 themes evolve through metaphors that are kind of correlated to each of them,
right?
And it kind of swaps from one of those themes to the other in between songs, sometimes during the songs. So at any point, the lyrics are related to any one of those concepts. And I was finishing up my environmental studies, my master's degree in sustainability and environment. Man, environmental issues are brutal in many ways.
I mean, we might get some hate in the comments and whatever, but I agree with you. It is brutal. You're talking to a guy who works for a company that tries to adhere to the SDG, so I feel this. And it's a subject that is more relevant than ever. And I feel that a lot of musicians and creative people tend to have their say on that. So then art is a good way to express that.
I didn't want it to feel like the lyrics were giving a lesson or making a stance or anything, and mostly the lyrics are just about how I dealt with those issues, because this was overwhelming for me. I was very vulnerable at that time. I feel like I'm a pretty sensitive person, and those studies completely, they wrecked me, buddy. It was brutal.
No, fair, dude. There's a reason why there's a lot of people, especially around musicians and creative people, there's a lot of people who tend to consume the news and media selectively because they know it will be better for their sanity. Like they're balancing the fine line between wanting to be aware of what goes on around you, but also don't want to drown in the inevitable crushing darkness that comes along with that, so to speak. I feel that. And I think a lot of viewers who are watching this will feel that as well.
It was the future of our species and our planet that was the issue, but I think everyone can relate with any other topic. It's about the feeling of impending doom, and there's nothing you can do about it, you know.
I feel that is war. In general, I felt that was kind of like obviously, I'm not sure if it's in every song, but that was something that I kind of picked up on in the whole record, which also drew me to it. It really felt like this whole record is one big apocalypse record, basically. Like, that's what it felt like.
Yeah, it's very nihilistic. I think it was also mirrored by the musical concept of it keeping speeding up.
Yeah, just going towards the end.
Yeah, losing control. losing control and not being able to handle the situation properly. The first of those themes was definitely this one, and I would say it's not the most present one in the lyrics. More than anything, it's the least present one. It's probably the easiest for me to talk about though, which is why I started with this one. The other ones are about my own mental health. Me recognizing I was a depressive person. I had depression during this was something I faced right before creating the album, and I recognized during the making of the album, and I think this album helped me a lot articulating it in a way that felt not so direct, which is what I needed at the time. But this was a very big part of me and part of the album. And the third element is a direct consequence of this one, is my personal relationships with my fiancée at the time, my friends, and how my own mental health issues affected them. In many ways, the album starts off with kind of trying to recognize and control all those elements, and eventually ends up with letting go. Like none of it really matters, and depending on what mood I am when I hear this message, it can be very positive or negative. But it felt like it was the only way for me to end this album at the time.
I get it though, in a sense that, I mean, obviously with a lot of musicians, and I know that, you know, the target audience for this show, I know a lot of people watching this either make music or are more invested in like the mechanics behind it. I've always been an advocate for talking about mental health struggles, and I'm very much in favor of people using art to maybe find answers they cannot find by simply talking about it. Because when you talk about depression, or when you talk about your life, you talk about this thing happened and that made me feel something. But sometimes it's not about the thing that happened, it's just about the fact that the feelings are there and that they are too big and you just don't know what the to do with it. And then in a weird way, I mean, this is something that I've told this to psychologists in the past that I talk to, because like I said, I have my share of help as well. And I'll be like, sometimes you just need a drum kit to play a blast beat and some really loud screaming to get it out of your system, because that's what it sounds like. That's what it is inside your head, you know? So you got to get it out there. And
Absolutely. For the lyrics in general, there's like so many ways you can try and discuss an emotion. Sometimes you have to be very blunt and very upfront with it. Sometimes you have to go through metaphors or
there's moments for metaphysicality and there's moments for directness. That really depends on it really depends on the musical context that can get that.
And that's something I also it was not conscious of me when making the album, but looking back on it, I kind of noticed that in some moments it's very abstract. The lyrics are very abstract, and like hidden in there are some moments that are just me straight up saying how I feel and being very direct about it. But since it's kind of in the middle of everything else, it kind of feels like it's still abstract. But that was something I recognized later on.
It's very contextual, isn't it? I mean, it's like the moment you put something halfway through a song in which there's this whole lead in a different way, then it can actually be very effective to sometimes just throw a curveball and be direct and blunt, because then the bluntness is not necessarily you. It fits within the context of whatever the framework is of what you're doing. And then it can check out. So I definitely, I can see the merit in that.
And I wouldn't say it's important for me that everyone kind of can read or hear the lyrics and feel like they relate to them, because to be honest, that's never been something that was important for me. I don't think of this when I write. I feel personally for myself that sometimes I can like hear a line or a phrase or a few words and feel very strongly about them, even though I don't know what they actually mean.
But that's just what that's what art is in general, let's face it. It's like you can have a record that is written about a specific person, and then you can still latch onto that one song because that one song just fits your vibe, you know? It's like a part of what you're describing now, I'm like, yeah, that checks out, that's what I got from the lyrics, but a part of it I also didn't. So I feel that that's actually a good sign, because then you didn't ram it down people's throats too much or something. It's not like you funneled it into their throats or whatever.
That's good. That's good. That was one of the intents, then I'm happy about that.
I think you did a really good job on that.
Oh, thanks, man.
Okay, so then we're heading into Satellites. That's the one you guys also released as a video and a single, I believe, right? So
Yeah.
what can you tell me about that one?
As I said, sometimes I just create my own like limitations or concepts around the songs. Like for instance, Sunday Heat, I wanted it to be very, very slow and doomy with 2 verses. The first one being more atmospheric, the second one being very wall of sound in your face. And this is kind of a structure I have in mind before going into the song. And then some other songs, which I feel the only 2 in this situation on the album were Satellites and Magnets. It's just a kind of a stream of consciousness flow of composition. You know, you have like 3 or 4 riff ideas in a guitar profile somewhere on your computer, and then you just try and figure out a way to make it work. So in the case of Satellites, I had a few of those riffs in my computer for a while, probably very much influenced by Nevermore and Gojira and Meshuggah in some cases as well.
I can definitely hear the Nevermore influence.
Nevermore, man, so underrated. They're like one of my favorite bands ever, my favorite vocalists ever, probably favorite lyricist ever. Nevermore. Oh man, that was crushing.
It's still weird to talk in the past tense about Warrell Dane, you know? It's like, because for me it's like, I've seen him live on tour with like Symphony X and Mercenary and a whole bunch of other bands, you know? And it's like, that wasn't that long. Oh, it was long ago.
Yeah.
We're old now.
This was my first and last time seeing Nevermore. And it was their very last tour. Like 3 weeks before they broke up, and obviously like 5 years before Warrell passed away. So yeah, very happy I got to see them. Amazing band.
I get that, yeah. So in regards to Satellites, is there anything, I mean, obviously you already dove into the concept in Sunday Heat. Was there like a magical sauce, or was there like this aha moment where suddenly it all clicked? How did that work?
Yeah, man, insomnia.
Yeah, just don't sleep, you know?
That's how it clicked. I was in my bed with insomnia, just thinking about like this album that I was writing. Since I was awake, I was like thinking about the riffs, and I was like, oh yeah, I can connect actually those 2 riffs that way, and maybe this could be a good transition towards this riff. So I just got up at like 2 or 3 in the morning, went to my computer and created a structure for it, and at 11 in the morning it was a full song. So this was actually one of the quickest songs I ever composed.
There's something magical about, I mean, there's nothing magical about insomnia, kids. If you guys stop sleeping now, I will punch you. But seriously, it's like the whole train of thought thing is really cool. Like those are, unfortunately it happened at night with you, but I tend to have those days in which it's like, oh, I have a good idea. And then like 6 hours later you have a song, you know, those are the best days, right?
Yeah. Sometimes it takes a lot of time. Sometimes it demands a lot of like discipline. You have to go to your computer and stare at the riffs and try to make them happen. And sometimes it's just magical.
Sometimes you just kind of poop it out in one go, and it's like, hey, there we go, we got a song. Yeah.
That's very gratifying when it happens. It's very, very satisfying. And for Satellites as well, there was this whole like second half, which is very prog rocky, with those kind of offbeat synths and choirs, and this was pretty much Gentle Giant worship.
I felt that. I actually really felt that while listening to it. I mean, I'm also a big Gentle Giant fan, so for me it was like, I like this part. I don't know what's happening in this part, but I like this part. You know, that's what it felt like.
Yeah. There's no hiding it. It's just like Gentle Giant, King Crimson worship, and I wanted one section on the album where I could experiment with like vocals coming in and out and overlapping with each other and having a kind of ostinato that felt a bit almost comical in a way, which is something Gentle Giant did so well, but in a dark way, you know?
It's like Gentle Giant, Zappa, kind of, you know, like kind of off the wall, kind of weird, but indeed with a dark infusion, because I felt, I heard the influence, but I felt that you did make it your own in that regard.
Oh, that's cool.
Because there's like moments, I'm a huge, like I said, I'm listening to Cardiacs and Zappa, and that's like my kind of stuff as well. And I love that kind of stuff, but it's all there. You can hear it when bands try to do it, and then it's like, there's the Zappa bit. You know what I mean? And then it does feel a bit tacky, or like you just said with the whole trying to make it fit. And it does feel natural. It doesn't feel weird or, you know, tacked on, like, oh, we need a section like that, let's just copy paste it in there or whatever.
Yeah, it's also Satellites, like, was since it's still pretty early on the album, the tempo is still pretty slow.
Yeah.
But we wanted it to feel relentless anyway, and it was a very cool experiment for us to have a very slow tempo, but with like high intensity, like drumming and riffing. Like bands like Gojira do this.
Yeah,
well.
Gojira are like the masters of that. Yeah.
Yeah, Morbid Angel back in the day, you know, having this like
having the double bass while it's still slow, you know, like that kind of, yeah, like the that kind of feel, you know, like there's so many notes being played, yet it still feels like a slow crushing burn, you know, that kind of situation.
I love this. Yeah, I love this. It was very, very satisfying to write, and it's still a pretty fun song for us to play. We still open the sets with this one.
It works. It's a good set opener. Absolutely, yeah.
I don't know what would work in any way. From like we had this discussion many times. What songs could we start the set with? And this like we have like 1,000 closers and no openers. So
so it's like, okay, Satellite's the opener because that's kind of the only one we have. Let's face it.
Yeah, there's a drum fill at the beginning, so let's go with this.
Okay, cool. Okay, well, my friends here at Layers, I'm going to close off this first episode of Layers. We will be back in 2 weeks with Romain Jenx talking about the Omnerod record, the Amensal Rise. Hope you guys enjoyed this first episode. Please leave a comment and all that good stuff in the section for the comments, because that's why it's called that way. And I hope to see you again in 2 weeks. So stay metal, stay happy, stay healthy, and we hope to see you in the next episode. Later, guys. Bye.